everyone. Daniel Forouzan, host of the Schmoozin with Forouzan podcast. Very excited, somewhat of a different podcast today. We're here with Mr. Danny Abir. And the reason I had him on the podcast is I had the privilege of having lunch with this gentleman a couple of weeks back. And on the way home from lunch, we switched the topic of conversation from the practice of law to the business of law. And that's why I'm excited about this podcast. The vast majority of podcasts I do in MCLE I see out there, what is it? Opening and trial, jury selection, discovery, etc. All of that is critical, but we're all also running a business at the end of the day. So whether you have a small operation, a large operation, I think this particular podcast episode will be very fruitful for all of us. So Danny, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
My namesake. Hi, Daniel. Happy New Year.
Pleasure. Happy New Year to you too, sir. So let's just jump right into it. Typically, I don't like to go into the tell us about your background. I'm not asking what colleges people went to and stuff like that. But in your case, before you took on the position that you have right now at Axe, which we'll talk about in a minute, you were a consultant, as I understand, beforehand. So I kind of want to get an idea as to your background in the law and how it kind of led you to where you are today.
Sure. I got my bachelor's degree in finance from USC Business School. For about 1.5 to 2 years, I had my own leasing company, leasing apartments in LA. And then I went to law school, which is really what my love was even prior to going to business school. Did law school at Whittier Law School, after which I went to Georgetown Law and got a master's in international law. And while I was at Georgetown, I got introduced to taxation by Marty Ginsburg, God rest his soul. He was Ruth Bader Ginsburg's husband. He taught corporate taxation at Georgetown. The man was so dynamic that he made me fall in love with corporate taxation on Monday mornings at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is kind of shocking. That led me to come back to LA and get a position with Deloitte & Touche in international tax. Wanted to learn more about taxation, so I went to NYU, got an LLM in taxation from NYU, and basically spent my first 10 years of my career in public accounting and doing international tax work. After 10 years, I decided I'm going to start my own practice. I came out at the time, I was with KPMG Marwick. I had a client, which is Skechers USA, the shoe company. They offered me to go on board with them. And I said, no, let's do it this way. I'm going to start my own practice and I'd be happy to be your advisor. I was being billed out at like $550, $600 an hour. And I built them half of that, and they were happy. I was happy, and it was a good start to a practice. A couple of years after that, I started working with a contingency practice, became the managing partner of that practice. And after about 6 years of that, after the firm was dissolved or the partnership was dissolved, I started doing consulting for law firms. And I think that's where we brought it back. And as part of the consulting, the one thing I learned while I was managing that contingency practice, which is mass tort practice, is that most lawyers, most contingency and plaintiffs lawyers particularly, don't have an acumen or background in business. And part of it has to do with the fact that I think most have liberal arts backgrounds, whether it's English, poli-sci, history, something like that, or psychology. And then they go to law school. So there's no business teachings or nothing in that regard in their curriculum. Then you go to law school, as you and I both know, you barely learn how to practice law or be a lawyer in law school, let alone how to run a law firm. So there's no business taught there. And then you come out and you have two options, basically. Either you go work for somebody, you're not running a business, you're an employee, or you start your own practice. So somebody who's starting their own practice at that point has had zero experience managing a business or running a business or looking at the business aspect of things all these years. And you start running a business, a law firm, and thinking, okay, I need to make money. What's the first thing that comes to your mind, Daniel, when you're thinking, I need to make money? How are you going to make money as a lawyer?
In my case, I have to settle a case.
Right. So you have to practice law, right? So this is what I was taught. I went to law school. I learned how to practice law. And now I want to be a lawyer. I'm not a businessman. I'm not a manager. I don't know about the business aspects. All I know is I want to make money. And if I'm a lawyer, I can make money, right? So the difference is that you still need to do branding. You need to do marketing, which is something you're particularly very good at, by the way. You need to know, especially in a contingency practice, what's leaving your business on a month-to-month basis. So you need to know what your nut is. You need to know how much money you need to live at home. And then you have to figure out some sort of a projection as to what's coming in, when it's coming in, and have a cushion, because one thing we've learned as contingency lawyers is that there's never, I mean, even a case that's already settled can take months and sometimes years in order for you to get paid on.
God forbid you sue a municipality or a county or the city of LA, right?
Oh, it's not that. That's the worst part of it. We actually had a settlement with an insurance company. 3 years later, we are not paid, and we're going to trial on it in March. We're going to go to trial because they blew up the settlement agreement by not paying all this time. And it's on a significant injury case. Same thing, funny enough, we had a settlement in December. Now, this is not as egregious, but we had a settlement in December that was supposed to be paid according to the terms of the agreement by no later than March 20th. Today is January 7th. At 2 p.m., 2 o'clock, 2:09 today, they finally wired the money. That's after we had sent them a copy of a complaint that was going to be filed on Monday, had they not paid on the settlement agreement, which was supposed to be over 2 weeks ago. No, 3 weeks ago, actually. So this happens. So if you're not careful, if you don't have cushions, if you don't have projections and budgeting and so forth, you're going to have issues. You're also looking at our environment today. It's very hard to hire. There's nobody out there who's looking for jobs. That's a hat you're going to wear if you're running your own practice. So all of this is something that, unless you've had some sort of a training in, unless you've had some courses in, unless you've had some experience in, it's going to be new to you as a lawyer who's starting your own practice. And when I thought about that, I'm like, okay, there's a need out there for contingency practices to learn how to run their businesses. One of my oldest friends, Alex Cohen, he reached out to me and he said, can you come and take a look at my practice? And that's the start of Axe Law. And about 8 years ago now, I met with him on a Monday morning, and he had at the time 23 cases in insurance bad faith and insurance coverage. And I said, so tell me, Alex, how do you get these cases? He said, word of mouth, previous clients, friends, family. Alex is very lovable. He's just, everybody knows him and likes him. So it made sense. And he said, no advertising at all, no marketing. I'm like, okay. He said, can you help me grow? I said, I can do it with my eyes closed. Why? It's a niche market. What he does, I don't know anybody else in LA who does it at this level, meaning an attorney who adjusts a claim from day one all the way through litigation. And I said, that's something that's easy to brand. It's easy to market because you're not competing with anybody. You just have to spread the gospel. So in a matter of 9 months, we turned his 23 cases into 75. He wanted to grow some more, and then we started putting structure around it, as any business would need. And 8 years later, that practice that I started consulting on with Alex is now one of the largest plaintiffs only practices in California. My partner Boris just won Trial Lawyer of the Year. We have 22 lawyers, and the 23 cases are now over 350 cases in litigation alone. And it was all based on principles of business. And I think that gives you a little bit of history of where it came from.
Yeah, and if, by the way, congratulations to your firm, congratulations to the partner at your firm who won Trial Lawyer of the Year. I, over the years, have actually watched, because I had heard of Alex Cohen, I don't know how many years back. He happens to be friends with a relative of mine. And I just remember, maybe we were Facebook friends, maybe I was looking at his website. I tend to look at other plaintiffs' websites just to see what's going on. And I noticed the firm was getting bigger and bigger over the years. I didn't know that you necessarily were behind it. It just so happens that we've connected now. Something I want to point out to the audience, the man said, not only is he working as a partner of Axe, but you previously worked at Deloitte.
Yes.
Is that one of like the big four? Okay. So, when I bring Danny on, guys, for those of you who are listening, for those of you who are looking to grow your practice, for those of you looking for business advice, you have a guy here who worked at Deloitte and he's now a partner at Axe. So obviously Danny has an idea about these types of things. Obviously Danny has a tremendous insight, and just from the conversation so far, you might be getting a flavor of where this is going. I thought for the sake of this conversation, I might throw myself into this to be a little bit of the guinea pig and talk to you, because you said earlier, you said the majority of the lawyers come from liberal arts backgrounds. Absolutely. I was poli-sci. I switched based on the advice of my uncle to business, and I ended up going to Marshall School of Business at USC. What an eye-opening experience that was. In poli-sci, yes, you had to have good writing, you had to have citations, evidence, blah, blah, blah. It was all theoretical and opinion-based. And then I came to business school, and it's like, hey, by the way, if you don't get revenue, the board's going to fire you as a CEO. It's much more cutthroat's not the word. I think, I don't know what the word is that I would use, but I'm sorry?
More real.
Yeah. Yes. There's a hardness to it that I experienced. Like, oh, geez, I can't just espouse opinions and get an A. Now I have to actually, okay, well, so be it. I can say that having gone to Marshall was probably very helpful for me. And yet, even having had gone to one of the better business schools undergrad, as an attorney, I still don't necessarily feel like I'm this magnificent businessman. I like to think I'm a magnificent lawyer. And as you were touching upon, a lot of my energy, and I'm sure a lot of people who are in my shoes, their energy gets dumped into the law, gets dumped into the litigation. And that is something that I see. There's days where I'm wearing the hat of marketing. There's days where I'm wearing the hat of podcaster. But the majority of my time, getting away from all the social media and all the events that I do, the majority of my time, I'm sitting behind a computer typing and reading. That's the glamour of it. And I agree with your sentiment. Something gets lost in between all of that. So let me ask you, let's dip into the goodies here. As a consultant, did you do plaintiff and defendant or just plaintiff?
It's funny, it became a very short period because I went from starting the consulting practice, having one firm that was a PI workers' comp practice. And remember, I was just by myself. I didn't have any employees, very similar to our conversation right now. So I was doing everything myself. There are only so many clients I could have. I had one criminal defense as well as PI client. I had workers' comp and PI client. And then Alex called me, and when Alex called me, initially it was very little work because I was trying to help him grow, and maybe one day, 2 days a week. And gradually, as it grew, it needed more and more management. So at that point is when I stopped looking at other clients, and I just focused on Alex's practice. So criminal defense, PI, workers' comp, and then insurance bad faith, basically.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. And let me ask you, in terms of the consulting, I understand it was a shorter period of time, but what was that like? What's it like? Because let's just be honest, any attorney, attorneys interact with attorneys, but what's the perspective like consulting with attorneys?
Very, very good question. And I think one of the things that even at the time, as a consulting practice, I looked to see, okay, what are the potentials of a business like this? And what are the problems that I saw? plaintiff lawyers, again, as we're making generalizations, but in addition to the fact that there is no business background, there's a certain level of ego, for lack of a better term, not ego in the sense of being full of yourself, but a self-confidence that you need to have as a plaintiff lawyer because you're taking cases on a contingency basis, right? So, because if you're getting paid hourly, you know the money's coming. If you're rolling the dice on a case and you're not going to get paid for 2 years, you have to have a certain degree of self-confidence, especially if you're a trial lawyer, in order to say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be able to get it. I'm going to hit it. Now, you want it to be realistic, but you still have to have that confidence. The problem with that confidence when it comes to this kind of a setting where you have a consultant is you have to hear and listen to somebody else tell you you're not doing it correct.
Lawyers love that, right?
No, that's exactly what it is. One, lawyers generally don't like to be told what to do. And then talk about plaintiff lawyers and trial lawyers being told, hey, you know what? This is a risk. And it's a slippery slope, because even as a managing partner of a firm, my job is a consultant in the context that my clients are my 3 equity partners in the business, as well as every employee and staff in the firm, because I need to make sure that the firm is run efficiently and correctly, that we are able to keep the lights on, we are able to pay the bills and make sure everybody's paid every month so they can pay their expenses, right? So in a way, I'm a consultant to them. I need to make sure that everything is run efficiently. So imagine translating that into going into somebody's firm. Open your books to me. Let me take a look and see how you're spending, where you're spending. Let me look and see how many cases do you have? How efficient are you in doing what you're doing? I mean, the comp practice that I looked at had a total of 35 people working there and over 1,500 cases, right?
Wow.
So it was a big comp practice. But then when I sat down and talked to the partners, I said, you know what? And by the way, that was not a good, that didn't go very well either. Because I told one partner, you guys have a 50-50 partnership, but this one is putting in 75% of the work. You're putting in 25% of the work. And this is creating an imbalance in the sense that the work that you're supposed to do is not being done. Nobody's basically watching the hen house. So there are 2 ways of doing it. You have to start working more in order to make up for the void and the vacuum, or you have to give up a certain percentage to somebody else to come in and be able to manage this for you or do the things that you're not doing. That kind of gives you an example of the kind of issues you have when you're consulting with somebody, trying to tell them what things they're not doing right. I think the beauty of doing that with Alex is Alex was actually very, very, very open to hearing what needs to be done. And that's what he wanted. He said, show me how to do it right. And he listened, and turned out that we were right. That's the way to do it.
And good for you, and congratulations. Let me ask you, is there a big, frankly, prior to speaking with you, I've heard of jury consultants. I've heard of financial consultants. I've never heard of a law firm consultant. Is that a big practice? Are there other consultants out there?
Over the years, I've known of, I would say probably 3 other people who do this nationwide, not even just in California. Very few people would do it. And again, there are 3 reasons for it. One, it's hard. Most lawyers are not looking for someone to come advise them, because either they don't know they have an issue, or if they have the issue, they don't know there's somebody who can give them the advice as to how to fix it. And then the third one is, even if they do know there's a problem and they do know they should get advice, they're not willing to listen to somebody else do it. So this is not something that would necessarily be a gold mine of an idea to do. The only reason I did it at the time I did it, I'm like, there's a void in the market for someone to advise law firms to do it. I've spoken to many solo practitioners over the years, meaning even after Alex and I started building a practice, uh, I didn't, at that point, I didn't do it for money anymore. It was more like, you know what, one, paying it forward. Two, I enjoy seeing young attorneys or solo practitioners who are trying to build something do it successfully, because there's a pleasure in that. And I've done it over the years, and it's funny. Even you talk to I've spoken to bankruptcy lawyers, I've spoken to employment lawyers, and it's like, how do I get cases? How do I get clients? What am I missing? Should I hire? Should I not hire? And all of these are all issues. In a lot of ways, for a contingency practice, the answer is the same for any type of practice. It doesn't matter what area you're practicing in.
Yeah, I can't imagine being a consultant and working with attorneys is the easiest job on the planet. So I appreciate that. Let me ask you this. Let's hop into the nitty gritty budgeting and the financial details of a plaintiff's practice. I'm going to get into some specifics. I'm going into advertising, staff. Should you hire lawyers? Should you have an office manager, et cetera? But generally speaking, what are your views? Budgeting, the finance of a plaintiff's firm. And if we have to break it down with, solo practitioner, medium size, large size, we can do that. But tell me what you think.
Okay, so budgeting, the most important thing about budgeting is, first you need to know, because you don't know how much money you can count on coming in. It is most important to be very efficient and keep that nut as little as possible. You cannot run a plaintiff's practice the way you run a defense practice. If you notice, when you go to a defense firm, you're looking at this long table, conference room table. They're usually pretty glitzy because, one, they're trying to recruit clients based on that, saying we are successful and people pay us in order to defend them, and so on and so forth. And two, they can count on, they have receivables. So you know what you're going to be able to count on month in, month out. You and I and most contingency practices don't have that luxury. So the smartest way you can run a contingency practice is to keep that monthly nut as little as possible. Meaning what? If you're a solo, until you have to, don't rent a space. Work from home, work from Starbucks, work out of your car. It's funny, one of my very good friends, Martin Aarons, he's an employment lawyer, and we had this conversation. He said, it's funny you say that. I was the Lincoln lawyer. I was working out of my car for a while. I was working out of Starbucks. I'd take my laptop there and do that until the money came in so that I could have a space. I'm a full believer that everything happens for a reason. COVID has done a lot of damage around the world, but there are positives that came out of it. And the positives, one of the positives is that it's taught us that we could run our practices from a law firm point of view. We can run our practices from anywhere, which is one of the reasons it's damaged commercial or office space real estate quite a bit, because law firms are thinking, you know what, I can have my staff work from home, particularly defense firms, and I don't have to spend so much money on rent. So rent a space when you absolutely have to, and then start doing everything yourself. So in order to keep that nut low, you're trying to keep your expenses as low as possible. Don't hire a secretary yet. Look at, for example, companies that can give you reception support. Call comes in, they pick up the call, they transfer it. You don't need to hire somebody 24/7 to do that, or you don't need, hire somebody in person to do that. You can have that system do it, right? Next, you need to do photocopying. Do your own photocopying initially, until you get to a point that you have enough cases that you say, if I spend my time photocopying, I'm not going to have time to do so and such, which should be done by a legal secretary, for example, or a paralegal, because initially you're doing it all by yourself, right? Unless you have a lot of money and you start with a lot of cases, initially you're doing it all by yourself. I'm assuming that's how you started, Daniel, right?
Yes, very much so. including sometimes going to Starbucks and working from home in the very beginning.
Oh, see, I didn't know any of this stuff. So I'm describing basically your journey, which, by the way, one thing before I forget, because when you were saying you went to Marshall, that explains your knack at marketing. You have a very, very good marketing skill. People know you, people like you. You're very likable. You have great energy. That helps a lot because when you're branding yourself, people will recognize you, people will remember you, and they will want to work with you, right? That's part of branding yourself and marketing. So going back to that, this is kind of part of your journey. You and I were talking about, what do you do? When do you hire somebody? When do you hire a lawyer? When do you hire a legal secretary? When do you hire a paralegal? And you have to look at it that way. So initially, you do all your photocopying, scanning. You do your own paralegal, the work that a legal secretary would do, as well as a paralegal. Because in order for you to pay somebody to do it, you, one, have to have income. And two, you have to be so busy yourself that opportunity cost is costing you money. So for example, if you're paying somebody $20 an hour to do something, right? You have to have two components in there. One, you have to have no more time left for you to do it yourself, number one. And two, what you are doing outside of that time period that's going to take to do the work at $20 an hour will make you more money, or it's worth more than $20 an hour. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And then you just build from there. So you start with the clerk, or the law clerk, or whoever is going to be doing the photocopying, and then you go to the legal secretary. When do I hire a paralegal? Okay, now a paralegal is going to cost you more than a legal secretary, right? Yes. Who's doing the paralegal work now? You, but you want to do lawyer work. So you have to have enough lawyer work to say, I'm going to have my paralegal do the paralegal work. I'm going to do the lawyer work. Now, when do you hire an associate? It goes through the same process. You're doing lawyer work. You can go bring in business. You can go, you have to run your own firm. You have to manage it. So that takes a certain amount of time. Whatever time that's left, the kind of lawyer work, attorney work that you're going to do has to be more sophisticated than the person that you're going to bring, or it's going to be more valuable than the person you're going to bring, or the work that you're going to do is going to bring more value to your business than the money that's leaving your bank account to go to the associate that you've hired. Does that last part make sense?
It does. And by the way, this kind of distinction, this kind of analysis, I don't hear other lawyers talking like this. I don't hear other lawyers saying, well, if you're going to bring someone on board, you got to see how much you're paying them and realize if they add value, could you be doing that? Or are you so overwhelmed with everything else that you can't do that, that it's worth your time to hire this person? This is not an analysis. Maybe I do it intuitively. Maybe I do it subconsciously. But what I love about you is you bring it to the forefront as if we're discussing business, not law. We're discussing the business of law. And you put in front of people, I cannot tell you how many other lawyers I've chatted with about starting a solo practice. I'm 10 years in now at this point. I've networked a lot. I've spoken to a lot of people. No one talks about it this way. And I think it's very helpful.
No, thank you. The things that I'm saying, funny enough, is exactly what you would do in any business, right? So if you're running a mom and pop shop, right? At what point do you hire an employee? Well, I've worked 40 hours this week. I've worked 5 days this week. I don't want to work Saturday and Sunday. For Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to hire somebody else to be at the store instead of me, right? But you would only do that, one, if you have income, where at some point you're going to say, you know what, I'm making enough money that I can take my Saturday and Sunday off, so I'm going to hire somebody else to do it. Now, going back to the context of a law firm, it's not always a factor of hiring somebody who can do work that you can do, but you can do it better. But it's a question of, okay, what's your superpower? Your superpower, Daniel, is that you're going to be able to bring in business, for example. Okay. Let's say that's what you're best at. Then at some point, you're going to have people working for you where they're going to be the practitioners, and you can go generate business for the Forouzan law firm. Does that make sense? Meaning you're still doing something that is worth more than the people that you've hired to do. Value that it brings to the business, so value, a different value that's going to bring in the business. So if you look at every slice of that pizza, as in that pizza being all the things that need to be done to run your firm efficiently and run it well, where you can make money and you're profitable, right? You have to look at who's doing each slice, and whatever slice of pizza that needs to be done, that you can do it better, you should be doing it better, unless the opportunity cost is more, meaning it will cost more for you to do that job than the person that you're going to hire to do it.
Yeah, opportunity cost might even be the title of this podcast. I'm hearing you loud and clear. Let's push the pace forward in the sense of, okay, so let's say there's a solo. They have hired their paralegal, their assistant, whatever it might be. Maybe they have an office, maybe they don't. I think a lot of people I talk to, or at least for myself, for example, right now I'm considering, should I bring on an associate? And this is the conversation that you and I had. And before we even get into the budgeting, let me add another aspect of this, which is I had to go through about 90 interviews and 3 different paralegals till I finally got to the one that I have today, and she's wonderful. Prior to her, the interview process, which I really didn't enjoy doing, was very laborious. Majority of candidates were not what I was looking for, and I worry that this might transfer over to hiring an associate. What do I mean? My offices were very thorough. We get into the details, a lot of strategizing, analysis. My first jobs were all in corporate firms, and then I got insurance defense training. So the creation of the combination of seeing how the other side practices law instilled great paranoia in myself, as they showed me how they screw plaintiffs' attorneys and how they work us to make sure that the settlements are as low as possible. As a result of that, we push the pace here in terms of litigation. I worry that if I hire someone else, it's just going to be, send a template discovery, template meet and confer. Maybe they file a motion to compel here and there. My biggest worry, besides the finances, how do you find someone who culturally fits your firm, because sometimes I get the feeling the real gunners are going to go start their own firm anyways. I'm pretty sure that's why a lot of people wouldn't hire me when I was younger. They're like, we know you're going to start your own firm. So how do you get past that? Because besides the financing, whatever that is, this is what scares me the most about bringing an associate into my office, giving them access to my privileged materials, giving them access to my clients who put their lives in my hands.
Interesting question. Over the years, I've actually, believe it or not, hired associates just like you. One of whom I love dearly still, and I still consider him my younger brother. When we hired him, I knew that he was going to go start his own practice. I knew that giving him experience is going to allow him to do that. And I did it with an open heart to do that. He gave us 3.5, 4 years, about 3.5 years. He learned a lot. And then he said, okay, it's time for me to start my own practice. And I knew that was going to happen, just because, not because of him saying I'm eventually going to leave you, but I knew the type of person I was hiring, just like you said. But he fit our firm. He fit our dynamic. He fit the kind of person I was looking to hire. One thing I think I told you, every single person at Axe has gone through my eyes. I've interviewed them, I've hired them, with the exception of 2 people in the firm where I was on vacation and my partner Boris hired. And I still joke with him about that. And I tell him that they're not really employees of the firm. They've turned out phenomenally well, actually. So I can't tease Boris too much about that. But every person at the firm I interview, from receptionists till up to partner level.
Mm.
Sorry. And the reason I do that is exactly what you described. You need people who are going to fit the culture of your firm, right? More important than anything else is that culture. So when you actually go ahead and interview, you're going to look and say, okay, is this person someone I can work with on a daily basis? Because right now, when you're a smaller firm, when you have 2, 3 people there, that's almost even more important than a larger firm. Because in a larger firm, I may hire somebody that half the firm may never even see in person, or they never may have a communication with. But in a smaller firm, the 3 of you, the 4 of you, the 5 of you are always working together. You're always in each other's faces. So culture and personality is very important. I think the answer to your question of how do you pick that person, it comes with time. Right now, I'm at a point that if a person walks through the door within the first 2 minutes, I know whether I want to bring him on board or not. And I think that's just, but I didn't know that when I started. When I started interviewing years ago, it took time. I made mistakes and I learned from those mistakes and it went on. I think the bigger issue with hiring an associate for someone like you or a young firm is what kind of work am I going to give them? And what kind of work product am I going to get? What if they get me into a malpractice situation? Okay, so I'm going to watch them like a hawk, right? You're going to make sure that the work product, because it's going to have your name on it, is going to go out the door. So how do I hire somebody where me having to watch over their shoulders, correcting what they do or making sure that everything is done right is at a minimum? So that's the dynamic that's going to take a while. And one of the things that you have to factor in when you're looking at hiring an associate, particularly an associate, because it's an attorney that's going to be doing attorney work for you, is exactly that. How much supervision is that person going to require? Forget the money that you're going to pay them, forget the work they're going to do. It's your name on the door, right? It's your license. So how much am I willing to give up? How much freedom am I going to give them? And do I feel comfortable sleeping at night? Somebody else is doing the work. I'm not trying to scare you into that, but I'm saying these are factors that you need to take into consideration when you're hiring an associate. And again, you have to see whether it's someone that you can work with. Does the personality matches with me? What need are you trying to fill? Do you need somebody who's more of a lot of emotions and a writer and a researcher? Or do you need somebody who's going to go argue in court and take depositions and is more vocal than somebody who's going to write? Or do you need the combination of both? All of these are factors you have to take into consideration into seeing what void or what need you're trying to fill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you saying all that. One thing that you said, you're like, well, you have to look over their shoulders. And what went through my mind is, well, if I'm constantly looking over their shoulders, what's the point of hiring these people, right? You're trying to get that weight off your shoulders rather than consistently looking over their shoulders. And that is something that, I'm going to figure out one way or another. And I agree with you in the sense that it might just take some time. It might take some rapport building. I appreciate that you were kind enough to hire someone knowing that they were going to leave. And I left law firms myself, so I understand that completely. And I think 3.5 years is a wonderful amount of time to dedicate. And I appreciate that. So let me ask you, in terms of the finances of having an associate, how do you look at that at a plaintiff's contingency firm?
Okay, are we talking about today or are we talking about pre-COVID? Because today and pre-COVID are two completely different times. The market is very different.
Yeah, to tell both, because hearing how it's changed since COVID will give us an insight as to how you do your analytics, and it'll be very informative.
Okay, so pre-COVID, the market to hire associates was very different. There were a lot more attorneys looking for work than there were legal jobs available. Now it's the flip opposite. I was funny enough telling Boris, my partner Boris today, in my entire career, I've never seen anything like this, whereby I just can't find anybody. There's nobody. It's very difficult to find someone You can find diamonds in the rough. You can find someone every now and then that they pop up, and when they do, you have to grab them. But it's very hard to find good people, experienced hires, experienced lawyers. So it's a very different dynamic. And the finances go along with that, meaning when there's more demand and little supply, price goes up. And then you have to watch your budget and say, can I afford it? Can I bring this person on at that price? And then in a bigger firm, there's a different dynamic that you also have to factor in. You brought everybody else in over the years, and now the market has completely changed. So can you bring in a 5-year lawyer at the same price as what you may be paying an 8-year or a 10-year lawyer? Those are all factors that you have to take into consideration when you have more than one associate that you have on board. Financially, when you're looking at your budgeting, you have to look and see what your prospects are for. Let's say you're looking at, okay, Daniel, let's look at whether you should hire an associate for 2022 and what your associate are you going to hire and what you're going to do, right? So one, you're going to say the amount of time that you want saved from you is from doing what exactly? Do you want somebody who's going to take the depots?
No, me personally, no. I the way you phrased it, someone to draft complaints, law in motion, discovery, even though I'm personally very heavy-handed involved in discovery myself. But my bread and butter, taking depositions, going to mediation, going to trial, going to court, some written I like written discovery, for better or for worse. A lot of people find that strange, but I enjoy meeting and conferring. I enjoy doing motions to compel, but I also appreciate, so long as I'm the one arguing at court, the paperwork, you can hand that out. So I'm looking for that guy. I'm not looking for someone to go to court. I'm not looking for someone to take the depositions.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this, if you don't mind, kind of like, okay, you are not the guinea pig, but you're the example of a firm that's looking to hire an associate, right? So based on what you're describing to me, a 2-3-year associate is about right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what you have to do is first, you have to figure out a 2-3-year associate. You look at a plaintiff's practice, potentially $100,000 salary, right? So what you have to look at is, can you take on a salary of that magnitude for the next 12 months, right? And you're going to have to look and see, okay, based on the cases that I have in the office, I project X case coming in with Y dollars in March, next case in another dollar amount in April, so on and so forth. And based on that and all the other expenses that you have in order to run your firm smoothly, okay, can you afford that person? But in addition to that, you have rent at home, right? You have your car payments, you have your car insurance, you have your whatever eating, whatever expenses that you have personally. When you're a solo, that's all part of your firm in a sense, because your firm plus your firm's expenses plus your expenses, you have to be able to clear every month. So if all of that is yes, or you have enough saved up that you can say, you know what, I can handle it this way. But if I bring in this 2-3-year associate, I can take on a lot more cases. Therefore, it makes sense for me to bring him on, get more cases as a result of it, which means at the end of the day, your incoming cash flow is going to be much higher than it would be otherwise, right? And I will be able to carry it over the next 12 months. And then as those bigger cases come in and the cash flow is coming in, then you can hire the next person to bring in more cases to do it.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm happy to use myself as a guinea pig here and kind of divulge my thoughts. Where I stand. So first thing I want to point out is how correct you were in saying you never know where the money's going to come in. We all saw 2020. I'm going to guess only so many cases got settled. And if you're not settling cases, you're not getting paid. And then an interesting thing happened. Had a great year this year, but even though the cases are settled and the accounts receivables are very strong, due to, whatever defendant having to get approval up the chain, or due to issues in subrogation where I haven't finalized the case yet and I haven't taken my fee, a sizable chunk of money that was supposed to come in this year is going to get pushed. Well, no, we're in 2022 now, excuse me. A sizable amount of income that was supposed to come in late last year is instead going to come in early this year. So I'm with you. And I certainly see the, you have to navigate these things. Beyond that, so the question that goes through my mind, and I'd love to hear from you. You said I'm good at marketing. We did an analysis in my office. The phone rang at least once every 4 days with a new potential case. However, I took on 15% of the incoming cases in 2021. I have a very low, I purposely take on very few cases. I wait for the bread and butter type of stuff to show up. And to be frank, I don't just do that for financial reasons. I do that because those types of cases get me out of bed in the morning. Those are the ones I'm motivated to do something on. Those are the ones that motivate me to litigate in the way that I do, which is somewhat, again, heavy-handed. The question for me would be, financially this year, I'm already set just based on the accounts receivables that rolled over. And then on top of that, I will have probably at least a couple of chunky settlements this year as well. The year financially looks very good. The question then becomes, if I hire an associate, do I, financially, not a problem to afford them, will they make me the money? In 2023, will I have these types of chunky cases coming in that I continue to have this cash flow? And I wonder if it wasn't for 2020. I wonder if it wasn't for that very strange year that kind of put some things behind or threw a wrench into everything, if the decision would be more clear. Maybe after having seen what happened in 2020, having seen people unfortunately go under, knock on wood, I didn't go under. Obviously, you guys didn't go under. We made it through that, but it does create a hesitation of, am I going to bring in enough cases? So if I'm taking 15% of the cases that are coming in, and again, it's a little, I guess I'd be less picky if I had an associate maybe, but if I have that going on, will I have the volume of cases that justifies having an associate, not affording them? Let's say you can afford them, but will I have the volume? Is there a justification, or am I just trying to take work off my back and put it on someone else's back? You see what I'm saying?
I get it. So let me ask you one question before I forget. What do you do with the 85% that you're rejecting?
Sometimes we try to refer them out, and if not, we just drop them and move on. Just by the way, that 85% that I'm rejecting, I'm not suggesting these are cases that are even worth referring.
No. I know that would have been my next question, is what percentage of those 85 are actually worthwhile for somebody else to take? The reason I was asking that is because that kind of goes to the answer to your question, meaning you already have a flow of business that's coming in for you that you're currently rejecting. And when you have someone that that can do more work, you will be more open to taking on more cases.
Of course.
You obviously have the ability to generate these cases. Maybe if you didn't have to do, I'm just telling you what the analysis would be, but if you didn't have to do the work that this associate is going to do in 2022 for you, that time that frees up, you would be able to spend more time on your podcast, more time marketing the firm. Therefore, bigger cases or more cases will come in to keep that person even more busy. Does that make sense?
It does. The follow-up.
That's the thought process that will go in there to try to decide whether you want that person on board or not.
Absolutely. The follow-up, though, the follow-up that goes through my head is, especially after having seen 2020, there is no guarantees. That's something I've come to learn. So the follow-up is, will the business be there? Even if I go out there and hit the pavement, I'm at every MCLE, we're doing 1,000 lawyer events and networking. And I go back to my old networking days where I literally had a networking event every week. But, is that worth it? Because even if you do that, there is no guarantee that the business flow is going to be coming. What do you think about that?
This is the thing. We can't run our firms or run our businesses or lives based on guarantees. If going back to the lessons COVID taught us, it's funny. I got interviewed about the great, what does he call it? The great resignation or the resignation. And he was asking that about, the reporter was asking that about law firms and how it's impacting law firms. And he said, what do you think is going on? Because in a matter of 3 months, the American workforce lost almost 15 million people. Well, 15 million quit their jobs during a 3-month period. Now, unless those people were looking for other jobs and found other jobs, which it doesn't seem like that's the way it's going, there's some disconnect there. And he was asking, what do you think is the reason behind it? I mean, you look at the real estate market over the past few years, you look at the stock market over the past few years, you look at the cryptocurrency market over the past few years, and you see that people's savings may have gotten at an age where they were closer to retirement, and maybe they wanted to retire in 5 years, but now all of a sudden they have exactly what they want and they're ready to retire, and they sell their home and get the profits and say, you know what, I'm done. Because COVID, one thing that it taught us is that our families are more important, and you want to spend more time with your family. And the isolation for those who have families and were isolated with their families, it bonds you more with those that you live with. And maybe that's what the dynamic was. So we don't know necessarily what's going to happen next year. You have to base your decisions in the way you're running your business based on sound principles of business. Now, will the market change in terms of more work out there? I mean, you and I talked extensively about what the state bar was about to do or is about to do to our practices. If they did that, what will happen to our practices? Well, my 16-year-old who wants to go to law school asks me, Dad, do you think I should still go to law school in light of what the state bar is doing? Like, you have hindsight. Wait a couple of years. If they do it, no way, forget it. That's reality. But you fight the things you can fight, and those things that you can't control and you don't know what's going to happen, you brace yourself for. One thing about COVID, and just an example to what we're talking about, in my opinion, and it's not always easy to do, you should live your life like it's a game of chess. Think 2-3 steps ahead. Back in January, February of 2020, we were looking at what was going on outside of the US with COVID. And my partners and I got together and we were like, you know what, let's do this. We had everybody have cameras and laptops and printers and scanners at home with good enough internet speed. And we set every one of the employees up in a way that if a lockdown was to happen, which it did, you could start working from home on a snap of a finger, right? We are paperless, everything was set up, and we didn't miss a beat. So by having that planning, and then I spoke to all of our vendors back in March, and I said, the number one goal for me is to make sure my employees are paid. I do not want to come to a point where I have to lay anybody off in a situation like this, have furloughs or pay cuts. Can you please work with me so that I can do that, make that happen? With the exception of one of my vendors, every single vendor did that.
Wonderful.
So we were able to plan ahead to make sure that we are facing something that was completely unknown and a surprise to everybody, and basically something that we had never experienced, and deal with it. At the end of 2020, we actually paid bonuses. Shocking, right? So by doing things right, you can do that. So translating back to your question, sorry, it was a long-winded answer. Going back to your question, plan ahead. Try to say, okay, you know what, right now, what's right for your business is to hire, right? Right now, what's right for your business is to have somebody to do the drafting of the complaints and basically the elementary stuff that you need done, instead of you doing it, or instead of having a paralegal do it, which, by the way, that was one of the ideas, is if you have one paralegal and your paralegal is fully capable and busy, maybe another paralegal can do some of the things a junior associate can do, which is drafting complaints and drafting discovery and so on and so forth. And it will cost you less, and it will be less of a strain on your budget. But if it is right for you to hire an associate, then hire the associate and make plans on how you're going to use your time efficiently to make sure that 2023, you'll have more of an arsenal of cases that are ready to be, that's going to translate into money. And hopefully next year, you'll be able to hire another associate because it's just going to keep on going up.
Yeah, and I think two things I want to point out that you said. Firstly, the thing about hiring a second paralegal as opposed to hiring an associate, I think there's a lot of law firms that might actually benefit from that. I remember the first time you told me that, I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought. The second thing I wanted to point out is kind of earlier in your answer, you didn't say this exactly, but you kind of said this, and correct me if I'm wrong. But so long as you're making decisions on sound principle, you shouldn't be making decisions out of fear. You should be making decisions out of sound principle. And so long as the principle is sound, you've put all the chess pieces in a way that you can move forward as best as possible. Look, there's always a risk. It may fail. There's a risk I might get hit by a boulder tomorrow, even though I live in Southern California. I don't know. But it's good to hear that. And I hope anyone who's listening also hears that. There are people who might be listening right now saying, well, Daniel, isn't all this stuff obvious? You hire an attorney, you can do more business. Yes, of course, that's obvious in a sense, up until you're in the hot seat and you're looking at the payroll fees and the legal this and the potential malpractice, and I have to train this person and all that. It gets a little bit more blurry, which is why knowing, frankly, someone like Danny and having the privilege and opportunity to pick his brain. I had that privilege, and now I'm trying to share it with everyone through the podcast. So if you're listening, good for you. Let me ask you a question. Biggest mistake you see plaintiffs firms making financially?
Overextending themselves.
Talk to me about that.
I talked about ego and self and confidence. One of the biggest issues with that is borrowing money against what you believe is going to be a home run, spending money before it comes. And by spending money, I'm not talking about paying your rent or your electric bill or your phone bill. By spending money, I mean going from for example, 3 Series BMW to buying a $200,000 car on the thought that, oh, I have a multi-million-dollar case that's going to get resolved. You'd be surprised, and going back to what you just said, it may be elementary and obvious, but you'd be surprised how many firms overextend themselves. And we've seen examples of that over the past couple of years, particularly with some big firms where they overextended themselves and then they tried to get themselves out of it, and they couldn't. Running their firm like a defense practice kind of goes hand in hand with the overextension. One of these firms, I was lucky enough to have the insight to their finances and what they were doing, and that was having financial troubles. And they had someone in their mailroom doing photocopying and opening mail at $95,000 a year salary. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Of course you're gonna go down like that. It's not about the question of not being generous, but every position in any business has a cap and has to have, the cap has to do with what you pay for that position, has to do with what that position is producing vis-a-vis the income that your firm is making, right? So paying $95,000 to a person who's opening the mail and scanning it, what are you going to pay your attorneys? What are you going to pay your paralegals, and so on and so forth? And then if that's the level that you're spending, are you making that money in reality, not in your mind, that's going to pay for it? Let me give you one example which stuck in my head over the years and I just can't get it out. One of the things we did over the past few years with Axe was we took over firms that were struggling financially. Their attorney had cases, their attorney was able to work their cases, but they were not able to manage the business correctly. So we took over the business and made it profitable. One such business, the attorney came to me after we took over and said, I'm going to need $30,000 for the trial on this case. And I said, tell me about the case. And he told me about the fact pattern. And then I said, okay, I'll bite. What would you do? What's the home run in this case if you go out and hit it out of the park? Believe it or not, he said $60,000, maybe 75. So you want to go spend $30,000 to at best get $60,000 to $75,000 outcome. He said, yes. I said, what's the client going to get? After you take out the fees and the costs, there's nothing left for the client. Oh, I was going to discount the fees. Well, if you're in the charity business, why are you doing that? Which kind of, by the way, explains to you why that firm was in financial trouble. So overextending yourself goes to that as well. You have to know the reality of what the value of your case is. If you're going to spend $30,000 on a case, you better damn well know that that case is a six-figure case, mid-six-figure, like 150, 200,000. You're going to spend $30,000, $40,000 in trial, which you already spent probably more money ahead of them. So those are the kind of things that it's not necessarily elementary to everybody. I think your experience of having gone to Marshall actually helps you avoid a situation like that, even though it may come as logic and elementary to most people, but not everybody thinks that way.
When you said it might surprise me to hear this, it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is a long time ago, I don't want to say the name of the firm. The attorney who ran it has been disbarred. But I remember this is back when I was looking for a job, and when I was looking for a job, I remember I read an LA Times article. It's like there is 2.5 attorneys for every one job. So no one can find a job. And I was fresh out of law school. I had no experience. No one would hire me. Lo and behold, what a blessing that was in the long run, because it guided my hand towards opening my own firm. But I remember going to this individual's office. It was like a defense firm. This is a plaintiff contingency firm, did class action PI. And the guy told me, my monthly expenditure just for rent for all my office is about $100,000. And, I don't want to go too much into certain details, but, I saw the lifestyle was flamboyant. The trips to Cala, I go to Cala, I get a normal suite. I do my business and I go home. I saw this person's suite at Cala. It's probably nicer than most people's homes, the hotel that he was at. And I also knew that this firm would give out very nice cars to prospective prospects, I should say prospective partners who came on board, big name partners. And the firm expanded. It went from one name partner to four name partners. And I think in about 3 years, it collapsed. And as I heard it, they couldn't pay their bills.
This was a defense practice.
This is a plaintiff practice.
A plaintiff practice.
$100,000 a month just on rent. That's not payroll. That's just rent. Gorgeous office, stunning office. You go to the 40th floor of some office in downtown, and they have the whole thing. 3 years later, it collapsed, which is funny because I was actually asking them for a job. I found out the associates weren't being paid. And later, this individual was disbarred because he was dipping into his client funds. So I think as far as I'm concerned, if I have a conservatism to myself, USC helped. But I remember having seen that at a younger age. I was like, geez, as a plaintiff, as a contingency attorney, you got to be careful not to overreach. I think arguably being financially conservative, arguably, is the better idea if you're running a contingency practice. Would you agree or disagree with that?
100%. I mean, when you ask me what's the biggest mistake contingency practices make, I immediately answered it very easily, because it is without a doubt the biggest mistake they make is overextending themselves. And being financially conservative is truly the only way you can actually build and then continue running a successful plaintiff's practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
One
Danny,
of the things, by the way, Daniel, really quick, is that the opportunity to borrow money has become more and more available to plaintiff lawyers.
yeah.
That's one of the biggest issues, is that they get these loans, and you're not talking about loans at 3%, 4% interest rates. You're talking about teens and high teens and 20% interest. And that's taking on a business partner. And before you know it, that money just multiplies and creates that kind of situation.
Yeah, I've always avoided debt. And look, I had privileges when I was younger. I was able to live in my parents' house as I practiced and this and that. And there's privileges and unique circumstances that show up. But yeah, I've always avoided getting a loan really for anything I haven't needed it. Thank God my war chest has been more than sufficient to handle what it is I do, even though I do expend quite a bit of money. Sometimes, in some of these cases, $8,000, $10,000 just on depositions. I take very long depositions and things like that. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate, goodness gracious, we've gone well over an hour here. I promise you this would be 40 minutes to an hour. I think we're an hour 15, hour 20. So I've gone over the budget. Danny, you are always such a pleasure to speak with. This is what, now the third or fourth time we've spoken. I always look forward to speaking with you. You're so easy to talk to. You're so sincere and genuine. And the information that you have is so worthwhile. So I would invite you, please, sir, thank you for your time today. But if we could have a little more of it down the line, have you come back, maybe I'll even field some Q&As from solos.
And that would be my pleasure.
Right? That could be pretty fun. We could do something like that.
I always like to help. I enjoy helping, and to the extent that I have an answer to a question, I will give it. And if I don't have it, I'll find the answer and find it for you. So I'd be happy to.
You're a gentleman. All right, guys. Danny, thank you so much for your time. I thought this was worthwhile. I have a feeling that people at home are going to think the same.